Assistants have been a part of the allied health workforce for a long time, but not everyone has the skills and knowledge to work well with them. This program was created to help fill the gap.
That's just, this is Jen, who's going to guide you through the program. And I'm not going to go through the whole lot, but just so that you've got a bit of an idea, I'll give you a bit of a taster. And as John said, it will be live on the HETI online learning program fairly soon. I'm not quite sure the time frame of that, but it won't be long before it's there. So, so Jen guides you through the program, and where possible, she links it to the framework. So there's only one aspect that isn't in the framework, it's around communication, and that's much more, that has sort of the application of the framework as opposed to a part of the framework. So you often get this character of Jen up the top, and she says, if you want to know what the framework says, you click on her, and she'll show you the framework, but also as it goes through. So there's an introductory section, and in here there's a number of things. So a few things, I guess, for people who are less familiar with working with therapy assistants. Some people just don't know what allied health areas there are, let alone what allied health assistants there might be. So there's also just meeting a couple. We do have a bit of a representation from Orange here, so it's good that we've got some people from Western New South Wales and Broken Hill, actually. So here we have 4 different assistants working in different places. Some of them are in rural New South Wales, so both Michael and Tracy. Brenda's from Bowral and Peter's from Sydney. So I'll just show you what happens with these. So people, I guess it's really to introduce the concept of allied health assistants to some people who may be less familiar with them. So if we look at this, and if we can have the sound back on, Tim. Then it's like a little telly, you see, so you just go play. I won't show it all, but just to give you a bit of an idea.
My name's Peter Simon, and I work at Bankstown Hospital through the Transitional Aged Care Program. I'm just on a year at the moment. Under the instructions of an allied health professional, I go into the...
Then we can push stop, you see. So it's really just to give a little snapshot. It depends what people want to know. So what we tried to do was have a range of different sorts of positions, and transitional aged care positions is an area that there are a lot of questions around, so that's quite helpful. So if we can have the audio off again now. They keep talking. There's an over talk through the whole lot so that you can listen to it, or you can obviously mute it on your own computers. So then the next thing is that's helpful to understand is it has this bookshelf concept, and so this is kind of the navigation around this program. So you can see there are a number of things, but there's also this sidebar that you can also navigate around. People accessing this program may well go through the whole lot from beginning to end, and others will just want to look at various parts of it. So this sort of concept of a bookshelf plus the sidebar gives you that possibility. So on the top you'll see a number of files. Some of them are video and some of them audio around a day in the life of an allied health assistant. And again, there's a range there, which I'll show you a couple of those later. In this middle shelf, this is essentially the framework. But, I'm going to tell you about that in a minute, so you can just forget it for a moment. As I said, with the exception of communication, all of those aspects are part of our framework. So I'm just going to run you through just a bit of an idea of what one looks like. So if you clicked on scope of practice, and you have these 2 characters interacting a little. And then what happens is you can go on to Jen and see what the framework says. So on this page you then find these are the 4 recommendations of the scope of practice within the framework. What the framework doesn't have, which I'm going to run through in a minute, it's a bit tricky to know where to start really with this, is a lot of the application, because it's a guideline. It's meant to be a framework and a guideline that gets applied in other ways. But a lot of the way through the consultation, people would say, but what about this or what about that? So this program actually answers a number of those questions. So for instance here, one of the aspects of the scope of practice is the ability for flexibility. So this is probably something that, what does that look like? So if we click on that, it then gives you a bit of information, and if it's from the framework, it references it. So you can go back and see that in the framework itself. And then there are these sort of, what if type questions that people might ask or have asked through the process of the consultation. So I'm going to show you sort of an example of additional tasks that you might want to include in scope of practice. And then you click on that, and then it shows you, in this instance, 4 different sort of examples of extended scope of practice. And then if, say, for instance, we click on removal of stitches, which is a very unusual extension, but possible, then in the framework it recommends that if you are extending scope of practice, that there's a clear description of the task, training is required, that supervision arrangements and ongoing competency assessment. So this just gives you a snapshot of what that might look like in practice. The framework has it in theory, but this just gives a few sort of real life examples. And these are all examples of things that actually happen in our allied health assistant workforce. All right. So I'll pop back to the bookshelf. So, and each of those runs in a very similar way. So you can just keep drilling down and asking questions about that. So I said I'd go back to a day in a life. This is one of the, there's two Michaels in the program, both of them are from Orange. So if you can just have the audio back on again, Tim. This is a slightly different section. The first ones were little snapshots. These are sort of taking the aspects of the framework and a little bit like what Sarah and Santina are going to do in a few minutes is actually seeing what it looks like in practice in different settings. So one of the people who speaks in this section works in mental health, and that's an area that there's been a number of questions about. This particular chap is a dietetic assistant at Orange Base. So again, it's slightly longer, and each of them tells you how long it is before you click on it, so you can be prepared.
I'm Michael Ryan. I'm the allied health assistant in dietetics here at Orange Hospital. This hospital's new, it's only 2 years old, so I've been here for 2 years.
Okay, so that's just to give you a bit, I won't go through the whole lot, but it just gives you an idea. And I can see that people from Orange smiling because they know Michael. If you can have the audio off for the last time now, thanks, Tim. All right, and then the final thing which really pulls it all together is this bottom shelf. So obviously the framework's there because, we need to have the framework to work with this program. But there's also this section called Case Studies or Casebook. And this is a little bit like your frequently asked questions that you might find in a program. And so what it is a number of little sort of scenarios. And in fact, the people who did the computer part of this, that's not my stuff, I'm afraid, someone else has much more skill in that area, said, well, what are the questions that people ask you, Sue? And so that's sort of what we included here. So for example, we click over this tab, we might find a question. Sue is a very experienced assistant but has never had training other than on the job. Does she really need to do the certificate for? It's a reasonable question someone might ask. So there's two options here. One, you can go to Jen, who says, well, what does the framework say? And it'll direct you to the part of the framework that might answer that question, so it sort of has that link in. And then if you turn the page, you actually get my answer, which is the same as the framework, of course, but it just sort of says why you would do it and how you might go about that. So each of those tabs goes through different scenarios, different disciplines, different areas. I will just tell you there's one here, which is... this one talks about an assistant who's actually not a particularly good assistant. Now, the ladies from Royal Rehab will recognise the particular assistant in this picture. The reason that, and the person who developed it was a little concerned about using this picture against a scenario that sounded like, she wasn't very competent, but she's the most competent assistant that we have, and so no one would ever think that. So she didn't mind having her photo there. We got permission for her to have her photo up against this. She's not actually a physio assistant either, so that just gives you a little bit of an idea of that, of those sort of frequently asked questions. So we'll go back to the bookshelf. So again, there's always this button that you can go back to the bookshelf. So just in summary for this program, and as John said, once it's on live, please go and play with it. The aim of it was actually to set the scene. To give some structure and then pull it together into some real life examples so that you could kind of go, for those people who are less familiar, have a much better idea, but the content is all there, but in a fairly interactive and sort of chatty way, as if I was talking to you in the room.